Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about some real things that matter a lot in your life. So this morning, we have a guest who I've known for quite a long time, about 26, 27 years now. So John Wray's a local boy, and he lived in a couple areas locally, but most of his life, and I guess that's since 1955,
Yes.
he's lived in the same house. And I find that amazing, other than going away to college at Penn State. So he gave me this long bio to read, and I'm just going to skip through some of it because we'll get his story as he talks. He worked for J&L Steel as a towboat dispatcher, which sounds pretty interesting. I didn't know towboats needed dispatched. And he had a 6-week stint in umpire school, and not everybody's gone to umpire school, so
No,
we may learn something about that. He worked for Ketchum. He worked at Suburban General Hospital in Bellevue as the executive director of the Suburban Health Foundation, then director of Church Financial Campaign Service of the PCUSA, stewardship director for Calvary Episcopal Church, fundraising consultant for the Board of Pensions, PCUSA, Presbyterian Foundation, and Church Campaign Services. I think we're seeing a theme here, John. So his grandfather and his grandmother were charter members of Waverly Presbyterian Church. And if you've listened to a few of these podcasts, you've learned a lot about Waverly Presbyterian Church already. His father was clerk of session of Waverly. His mother was one of the first female session members. And he joined Waverly through the communicants class when he was 13 years old. He's been a session member on and off, volunteered in various capacities at Waverly down through the years. And I won't go into all those hobbies other than the fact that he plays bridge, because I have played bridge with him. And he's married to Holly. So that's as far as we'll go with this bio. John, you know how this works?
I do.
So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, and you get to tell us about your spiritual journey from childhood to the present. Then I might ask you a few questions. You know I'll ask you some questions.
I do know that, Bob. Yeah. I have seen a number of the podcasts, and I will say that my spiritual journey is sort of I don't know whether typical or not, but it's not real exciting. As you indicated, my grandparents were members of Waverly. My parents were members of Waverly. I've been a member of Waverly for my entire life. So my spiritual journey is Waverly Presbyterian Church, really. And it's interesting because one of the hobbies other than bridge that you indicated, or things that I like to do, is to attend the adult Sunday school class at Waverly. And this past Sunday, we talked about whether one of the questions that was asked was whether or not you had an aha moment with Christ, found Christ at some point in your life and turned to Christ. I never had such an aha moment. It has always been a part of my life. Through Waverly, again, born into the church. My parents were very involved. So it just was it was a natural thing. It was almost like breathing, if you will, being a part of Waverly and what Waverly was and is. So my spiritual journey really was being involved with the church. And as you read, I've been involved with the larger church. I do some volunteer work for Pittsburgh Presbytery, which I find very interesting, and also was involved with the national church because Church Financial Campaign Services was part of the PCUSA. So I was the director of that and had an office down in Louisville that I would go to maybe once or twice a month. And I will say that part of my spiritual journey was being involved with people at the national level of the PCUSA. These are very bright people. They're very spiritual people. They are very knowledgeable, educated people. And I just found it fascinating. I will say one thing that my mother used to do is give me presents, Reader's Digest books about the Bible. When I was a kid. So I would, I would look about, Jesus or Paul or early Christians or this, and I always found it fascinating. The history of it, the theology of it, and being around people at the national level of a major denomination, particularly as it related to stewardship, which you can tell from what you read is what I've been involved with for quite some time, has been very enjoyable. There's a national conference every year that I was one of the founding members of that's called Stewardship Kaleidoscope, and it invites people from all over the country to come in and talk about stewardship and about giving and about generosity. And I've loved it. I've loved hearing people preach about it, talk about it, exchange ideas about it. And all of that has played into my spiritual journey. And one of the reasons that I put down besides Bridge of the adult Sunday school class at Waverly is because it's just interesting. It's open conversations. We usually have a guide that your wife, Amy, over the last couple of years has been leading the group, although there are other people that take turns during the week. But it's just interesting. I like to hear others' ideas. I think I'm open to other ideas. I like to hear how other people think, how other people communicate with a power greater than themselves. So it's enjoyable. I look forward to it. I'm going to be away this Sunday. I'm already missing that, but we'll get back into the groove on that. So again, my spiritual journey is there's nothing really revolutionary about it. It's, I guess, maybe a little bit unique, sort of like living in the same house. Although I did move away for a little bit, lived in Black Ridge, another area of Pittsburgh. But when my father died, we ended up moving back in with my mother for a little bit, Holly and I, and my young son, John. And then she moved up with my sister, so that's how we took over the house. And I understand that's a little bit of a Pittsburgh thing.
Yeah.
So, in fact, when I was the stewardship director at Calvary Episcopal Church, which was interesting, it's one of the largest. I think it is the largest Episcopal church in Pittsburgh, and my mother was raised Episcopalian. So that was fascinating, and I remember when I interviewed for the job that the rector there told me that the only thing I needed to remember is when I said the Lord's Prayer, it was trespasses and those who trespass against us and not debt and debtors, which when I attended services there, I made sure that's what I said. So I guess my spiritual journey is, Bob, I just have always felt a part of God's world, Christ's world, and found that very meaningful and very enriching.
Yeah. Well, there's, people may wonder, well, why is Bob having John on the show then? Because we get so many different perspectives. But to me, your perspective is a different perspective. We're all on a different journey, and there are because of your consistency and you're being able to view the church over time, the same church, the same Presbyterian struggles that the larger churches had, that I felt that you probably had some unique perspectives on those things. For instance, I can recall going to some local Presbyterian, district Presbyterian meetings where there was a lot of contention, especially around gender issues in the past few years. Many of those have been resolved, but not happily to many people's sense of what that would be. Can I hear your take on that whole struggle and how that worked through and how that affected you personally, or if it affected you personally? Because I don't know, I think we were all affected personally by, all right, there are two sides, and you take one side or you take the other side, and it seemed like neither side was going to compromise and stay together. So,
yeah, and it's probably the gay situation in the Presbyterian Church is what I think you're alluding to, and there was a struggle there, and not being gay myself, I don't think I felt the intensity of that, probably as much as I should have, the empathy on that. I just believed that all people are God's children, so the idea of you can be members but you can't hold office, or even going way back, this is a wrong way to look at things, and you've got to do something about yourself to right the ship, if you will. That never played into me because I've known a lot of gay people throughout my life, and I never saw them as really different, even though society saw them as different, particularly when I was younger, and it has progressed in the right direction, because that no longer is the case with the Presbyterian Church USA, which is a very, very good thing. But again, I always thought that since that was the right way, that it would happen. Did I do anything to accelerate that? Not really, except in the fact that I was welcoming. So, excuse me. Sometimes I think that, looking back in hindsight, maybe I needed to do more in a lot of different areas. But again, my spirituality, and this might be a bit of a cop-out, really, is that I've almost, and I've mentioned this before, lived life a little bit like Flotsam and Jetsam. I never had a real goal that people had. I want to be a fireman or a teacher or a doctor. I just sort of followed a flow and have lived life. And now that I'm getting to the, let's say, late summer.
The late summer of your life? Is that it? Okay.
Yeah, it's probably a little later than that. But it's been good. It has been good, and I haven't done anything spectacular. If you look me up on Google, there's a lot of John Wrays that pop up before I pop up. So getting back to your question, what the transformation in the church in the PCUSA, I've just seen as coming, and going in the right direction. And I'm hopeful that a lot of different things, the church, society moves in the right direction, and the right direction would be toward a kinder, gentler society. And I guess my little part in that is to try to be a kinder, gentler person when it comes to my interactions with people.
Yeah. Well, it's that whole thing of, it begins with me, and that's the most you can take care of usually is yourself, and then show that, and that does bring me to these Sunday school lessons that you were alluding to, and the whole thing of Go Tell, which is having to do with proselytizing or evangelizing, and I felt that you had an interesting take on that, including one a little bit opposed to your wife's take on this. So, and I think I mentioned to you before we got on the air that I had a synchronistic experience to our discussion. So just to let the audience in on this so that we can talk about it a little more openly, we were addressing the fact that there are people who come door to door in a lot of neighborhoods around the country to evangelize. So if you would express your response to that and why you had the response that you do.
Well, yes, we talked about that because I think some of the people in the class said, that's not their way. They would not do that. And I think that's a lot of more progressive churches. And Waverly, I would say, is a progressive church, feel that that's not quite the way to go because it's foisting your opinions on someone else, and that is maybe not the way that a more progressive church would look at things. Mm-hmm. But I often get, and this started a number of years ago, when Jehovah's Witnesses came to the door, ring the doorbell, dressed up, generally African-American people, as part of whatever temple that that they're involved with. I think it's over in Wilkinsburg. But they would ring the doorbell, and I know that my wife, who is a good person, very good person, but would say, "Oh no, it's the Jehovah's Witnesses," and I wouldn't say bounce up out of my chair, but I would get up out of my chair, open the door, and welcome them. And I'd take a step out onto our porch and welcome them with conversation. And they were very happy that I did that, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. Just as I indicated, I enjoy the adult Sunday school class because it's talking about theology and religion and faith and spirituality. And these people have a little bit different view of it than I do, but I do realize they're very, very sincere on it. And that is, that's exciting to me. It is exciting to see their excitement. Yeah. And sometimes I wish that maybe I had a little bit more of that, or our church had a little bit more of that, where I'm knocking on the door and being excited about the gospel, and truly being excited. I mean, you could see it, you could feel it, gave me a good feeling. And so I would take their pamphlets, and they said, will you read this? And yes, I will, and I do, and I did, and have. So, and just enjoyed talking with them about that, and do you know Jesus Christ? Yes, I do. And I mentioned I go to Waverly, and, I attend regularly, and we would, have conversations about, well, he is the way, the truth, and the life, and, there's the way to God is through Jesus, and I happen to believe that, but I happen to believe also that Jesus will make up the determination of what's happening and with people and taking stock of people's lives, no matter where they're coming from. And so that's how we differ just a little bit. But having that conversation with them, knowing that they're coming from a position of love as well. And I truly feel that, we're brothers and sisters when we have the conversation on the porch. And I will say, since I started doing this a number of years ago, I get visited rather regularly now, because I think they enjoy the conversation too. So, and by regularly, I'm not talking about every week. Every couple of months or so, they'll show up at the door, and it's they're always welcome to have a conversation. I'm always welcoming to have a conversation with them.
Well, I have to say, and I mentioned some synchronicity around this earlier, that we just had that discussion on Sunday, and the very next day, the Jehovah's Witnesses were knocking on my door, and rather than just turn them away or not answer the door, I stepped out onto the porch and had a conversation with them and took their pamphlet and had a discussion. And indeed, that was a very different experience. And I let them know that I appreciated that they're getting the message out, that somebody should be doing it, and I appreciate the fact that they're doing it. And I'm sure that they don't get that response very often.
No, I don't think they do.
But
they're out there trying, Bob. I mean, they really are.
Oh, yeah. And as you said, with a lot of sincerity and a lot of love. And I don't know that you can ask for more than that.
No, they're very, very nice people.
So you changed my perspective on that whole situation.
Good.
So,
and hopefully you got something out of the conversation,
for that.
You've indicated that you did.
Well, part of what I got out of it was feeling better about myself in terms of my response to them.
Yeah.
Rather than a negative response, having a positive response and therefore a positive interaction. And that positivity releases endorphins, which makes you feel better.
Yes.
It's all about the chemistry,
I know. We were talking about that on the way over. I don't know whether you want to talk about that or not,
Sure.
Bob, but it was, I picked Bob up this morning when we came over, and of course, he brought up the fact of the Steeler game being last night, and did I stay up and watch it? And I am a sports fan, so yes, I did stay up, and we started talking about how the angst, and I must admit I raised my voice a couple of times at the Pittsburgh offense, and Bob started talking about the fact that just releasing yourselves from stress and anxiety from a chemical standpoint in the body is worth thinking about, and that you Bob had indicated sort of don't watch the news as much anymore or get involved with that, or if you're going to watch the Steeler game, do it the next day and hear about it, see the highlights. You don't have to stress out about it. And you know what? I've thought about that as I've gotten older, because I still get wrapped up in it and have a feeling that there's nothing good really coming from it. There really isn't a lot, except the excitement when the Browns didn't make the fourth down play, and I knew the game was over. So, 1 minute of elation as opposed to 60 minutes of
Yeah.
So it's a chemical thing, and I think we've had conversations about that before, as far as a spiritual standpoint too, because we've talked about the mind and the heart, and I know we've had that conversation.
Yeah.
And I've looked at it as it's all mind, because it's all what's happening here.
Yeah.
It's all chemical. The heart pumps the blood. The mind does everything else. It does the feelings. You indicated, though, and I think there's some justification in this, that when people talk about things coming from the heart, you can almost feel it down here, in this area. So whatever chemical reaction the brain is causing is making it happen in your heart region. And I think that's why it's talked about coming from the heart. But I'm, even all kinds of spirituality. I mean, it's there, but it's all coming from the brain, and releasing endorphins, other toxins from a negative standpoint. I find that fascinating too, as it relates to spirituality and theology.
Yeah. Well, scientifically, what they've discovered is that there are 40,000 neurons in the heart. And that the heart, in terms of the development of the fetus, the heart is developed before the brain is. So those neurons function first, and eventually the brain develops. But the brain is not the mind, okay? The brain is a thing. The mind is something else, and it's beyond it's beyond the brain. So where your thoughts come from are not from the brain. I know that goes against maybe what your intuition would tell you.
Or my biology 11 class in college.
Yeah. Well, it's just like scientifically what they've discovered is that when we say it's in your genes, it's like you have no control over it. But now that they've discovered what's the new terminology, the science of epigenetics, is that your genes are affected by your thoughts, by your emotions, by your feelings. They affect what happens with your genes. So
that is fascinating stuff, Bob. I mean,
you are not determined by your genes. Your gene expression is actually determined by you. So anyway,
that's pretty heavy, Bob.
Well, it's
fascinating.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, it's what the latest science has shown, and it's relatively new science. Epigenetics has been around about 20 years.
Yeah.
So this stuff is just gradually coming into public knowledge and public information, and just the sense that we are more powerful than we know in terms of how we affect our own biology.
That is just fascinating. It is. I am fascinated by that. That is.
I can recommend some books to you. The Genie in Your Genes is one that I'm reading right now, but Bruce Lipton, who wrote the book The Biology of Belief, and that's, as the title says, what you believe affects your biology. So think about that one.
That's given me a lot to think about, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and I think I hopefully prepared you for this, because part of the struggle for a lot of churches have to do with the intersection of politics and religion. And I know that I was recently at a church. I won't mention the church, but it was down in Virginia Beach, where now they're wrestling with whether or not the church is going to stay together, or that particular church is going to split based on political beliefs of half the congregation versus the other half the congregation, and that sort of thing. Your sense of comfort at Waverly started to waver at one point, and caused you to do a lot of soul searching. And I don't know if you've totally come out on the other end of that, but I don't want to cause you discomfort, but as comfortable as you are in discussing that, if you could talk that through a little bit with our audience, because I think that's, although it's individual, it's really a situation that has affected many churches, many people in many churches across our whole nation. So that's, I guess, when you say your story isn't very interesting, I think it's very interesting.
Well, and again, I've been a member of Waverly, excuse me, for all my life. And I guess it was probably, and let me just say that, from a social standpoint, I'm a liberal in I guess, church thinking, in theology, but I'm probably more conservative when it comes to fiscal things, to politics, and so with Waverly, and my wife and I have been registered Democrats our whole life. We had recently changed, just a little while ago, to become registered Republicans, and that is definitely the minority at Waverly. In fact, there's probably 2 or 3 households that would call themselves, or that would be registered Republicans at Waverly. And I think down through the years, Waverly has been the same in the fact that it's a welcoming, caring church. We've become a little bit more mission oriented than we were when I was younger. But actually, I think the thing that saved Waverly when we were struggling mightily from an attendance standpoint and realizing that we might have to close our doors, and realize that, well, if we're going to close our doors, we're going to go down fighting, meaning that we are not going to circle the wagons. We're going to actually move the wagons forward in dealing with mission. And that I think that really saved the church. Just a little anecdote, we weren't giving any money to mission a number of years ago because we needed to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And then realized that, no, that if we're going to go down, we are going to give to mission first and then see if we can survive. And we have. So that has really always been there with Waverly. And that's what I like very much about Waverly. And we've had pastors in the past that have been, that I know have been much more left of center from a political standpoint than I am. But always, when they were talking about in their sermons, looking at something a certain way, I could sort of see the way from a political standpoint they were looking at it, but it also fit in the way my political outlook was. I could hear what they were saying and believed it, adopted it, because it was done from the broader theological context of caring, loving, helping, kindness. And then it was a pastor not too long ago that ended up being extremely political from their actions, and it was striking because I was feeling as though what I was hearing was, "You're no good," meaning people that didn't look, people that didn't respond to political situations a certain way. You're no good. And that really had not been the case at Waverly before. And it was very difficult because throughout the service, an hour long, including 20 minutes of the sermon. I felt like I was getting beat over the head because of my political views that didn't align with the pastors, and that made it tough. And the rest of the congregation was that right on, because that was, from a political standpoint, they were hearing exactly what they wanted to hear, and I wasn't hearing. I was hearing more politics and less Christian love and theology.
Yeah.
And that hit, and I will say that it has changed, and I'm feeling much more comfortable at Waverly. There was that period of a number of years. So even now, when I hear the pastor or other people going in a certain direction, I know where they're coming from, and I'm just sort of, cringe isn't quite the right word, but I'm on guard of, they're going to say something from a political standpoint that I don't agree with, and I'm going to be the sole person that's going to have to speak up, and it's not one of my favorite things to do, from a political standpoint. Yeah. But it is, it's helped me and my wife to have great discussions about our thinking and our theology, not so much our politics. That really hasn't changed, because my politics I can reconcile with being loving, kind, generous, but we will often do a Bible study and we'll think, well, that's not the way Waverly is thinking it, only because that's not, from a political standpoint, the way we're thinking about it. So I think there was a period of time not too many years ago where it was very, very political. And it was just, I'm not getting anything out of this except feeling like I'm no good. And I think that's what's turned a lot of people off of organized religion, is you go and organized religion is telling you you're not so good, so shape up, as opposed to the embrace of you as an individual and your thinking, and you may not have quite the right, you may not have the same viewpoint, but you're welcome and you're loved and you're embraced. And there was a period of time where that was not there. It is there now. It's back, even though from a political standpoint we're still the outliers, but that's okay, because there's been a couple of times, even in the adult Sunday school class, where we've said something and somebody said that I know is on the other side of the political spectrum, I never thought about it that way. And I thought, well, that's something that in conversations that I can let my, not so much political views, but just my thinking about the world come across with people knowing that it's coming from hopefully from a caring and generous and loving perspective. And that's another way to look at it. Just as fundamentalists, and we've talked about this at Waverly, people, sort of look at them and there's sort of you rear up a little bit, but they're coming at it, and if they're coming at it from a loving and caring standpoint, as they're feeling it, then I'm not gonna knock it. I may not agree with it, but I'm not gonna knock it.
Right.
Did that answer your question, Bob? I don't know.
Well, I think what comes across just in your narrative is the struggle. I can feel the struggle. I understand the struggle. And I guess I'm one with you in the sense that politics shouldn't be coming from the pulpit. That that's not where it belongs. And yes, there are issues of social justice that people feel strongly about. And, they talk about, well, Jesus was all about social justice too. But to me, the overall message of the church should be one of love. And I agree with you that the message that comes from Waverly is love. Love is what we're all about, and everything else is secondary. That's the primary message of the gospel. That's the primary message of Christ. That's the primary message of most religions.
And I have felt that at Waverly really my entire life, except for that little blip. But that was a blip, and again, the congregation as a whole, even though I knew that, excuse me, they were, we weren't on the same page politically, still embraced me and cared for me and was looking out for me. And we had conversations, about that. And I felt that from you, Bob, and very much appreciated it. Wow. Very much.
That's, if we keep the primary message of love, and that should be what we're all about.
Yes.
Is coming from the heart, and that's where that love resides, and that's where it gets expressed, and just spread it around.
And I have a whole new view of heart now, which
Your heart is smart,
which is good to know. I mean, really.
The heart is smart. It is. I'm thinking about the struggles that the church has, but because you've been so much on the stewardship end, on the financial end of the church as Waverly, but the broader church and the PCUSA and what that's all about. I love your message of abundance. And I'm going to let you speak to that because I think that abundance is something that we all need to incorporate into our lives, that often we think of what we lack. And so we come from a sense of lack, that we have to get this, that we have to get that we don't have this, that those people have this, and I don't have that, and I deserve that too. And that goes even to your taking the trip to Rwanda with the group of us and that experience. So maybe you could tie all that together. I'm going to throw that one at you.
Okay. And really, this is, and I don't know how our timing is going here, Bob.
I'm keeping an eye on the time.
Okay,
don't worry about that.
But I know that, you ask at the end to come up with something, and it might actually tie in now, if that's okay.
That's okay.
Well, and it has to do with what message, and I take just a little pause when you said talk about stewardship and the financial aspect about things. Well, stewardship is not a financial thing. Stewardship is a way of life, summarized with the word generosity, really. And it's interesting because the passage that I was going to talk about at the end to sum up, and I've been thinking about this because you gave me the heads up on this, was a very, very familiar passage, which is 1 Corinthians 13, 1-13, which is the, quote, love passage in the Bible that Paul wrote to the Corinthians. Mm-hmm. But, and I'm not a fan of this, and you know this from our adult Sunday school class, of the King James Version of the Bible.
Yeah.
Although it's, there's something really poetic about it. But it was one of the early renditions of the Bible in English. And when they talk about at the end, but faith, hope, and charity, but the greatest of these is charity. And it's interesting because there was a fellow that I met through the National Church, a fellow by the name of Carl Travis. He was a senior pastor of a church down in Dallas, Texas, big church down in Dallas. And he'd done quite a bit of study and research on substituting the word generosity for the word love in the Bible. And if you read that passage in 1 Corinthians, charity and generosity are basically the same word. And I did a little studying and research of looking the two words up and what the commonality is there. And it's interesting because the word, one of the definitions of generosity is abundance. And abundance as opposed to scarcity. And just a funny little story. When I first started to work for the National Church and went to my first national convention, an esteemed scholar in the Old Testament, Walter Brueggemann, was the speaker. And this is, as I mentioned before, this is what has fascinated me, being able to attend things with this guy's written books and lectures and is renowned. And in introducing him, they wanted to have everybody stand up. And then anybody that has had actually had Walter Brueggemann have a class of his, you can sit down. Anybody that's ever read a book by Walter Brueggemann, you can sit down. Anybody that's ever heard of Walter Brueggemann can sit down. I'm looking around. I'm the only one standing up. His great focus is abundance as opposed to scarcity. That if you have to sum up Walter Brueggemann, it's abundance. And it is, that's really what I think makes for a caring, loving person. Is just being generous. Because one of the definitions of generosity is kindliness, which is interesting. So, faith, which I believe you have to have. Hope, which is another very important quality because it's an optimistic thing. Yeah. And you've talked about that. So much of what we look at is negative. We don't have this. But hope is a very positive thing, and charity and generosity. And the greatest of these is generosity. Another definition of generosity is agape, which is the Greek word for love, but it's brotherly love. It's not a sexual type of love. And I've often thought in the Bible the word love is overused because it carries so many connotations. I love the Pirates, and I don't know why, but I do. But that's not the kind of love that we need to be talking about when we're talking about interactions with people. So the stewardship angle of being abundant was key. And as you talked about Rwanda, to have the opportunity to visit a foreign country, a foreign society really, that's doing good, I just felt that from a generosity standpoint of giving of my time and I think my talents of being good with kids, that was actually my degree in college was early childhood education, that this would be a wonderful experience for, I know, me, and I hoped for the kids. And as I mentioned on Sunday, there was one young man that, excuse me, we met over there, a fellow by the name of John Paul, who I've stayed in touch with in the years, and we went, 5, 6, 7 years ago now, whatever it is. And I've stayed in touch with him over time, and that's good. And that was something that I was able to pass along, and he was able to pass along that connection, and that was wonderful. And I was hoping something like that would happen, and when I hope for something to happen, it usually happens.
Yeah. Well, and that brings me back to an earlier statement that you made about just sort of accepting what life put in front of you and going with the flow and ending up in situations that have been rewarding, and not being, not setting goals and a direction and just hoping that you can plow through life and get to wherever you're supposed to get to.
Yeah, and it wasn't really plowing. As you read, I started to work for J&L Steel, and I was able to get a summer job there in college. And came out with a early childhood education degree. And I think at the time I could have made about $3,000 a year doing that. So that wasn't gonna pay the bills. So my summer job, which was in river transportation for J&L Steel, I was able to do that. And when J&L collapsed and it became LTV, when it joined with Republic Steel, they were moving everybody to Cleveland, and I didn't want to go to Cleveland. But I thought, and my wife and I were talking about this the other day, what if we'd have gone to Cleveland? What a difference that would have made in our lives.
You'd have been a Browns fan.
Well, I don't know about that, but I might have been. But the thing was, there was a fellow by the name of Bob Thompson, who was a member of Waverly for a long time, and I'd known him since I was a kid. In fact, he was there. I think he joined the church when I was joining the church as a communicant. And he was the president of Ketchum Incorporated, which was a funds development firm here in Pittsburgh. And at the time, Waverly was small again, and we were living with my mother. She was going to move with us, and my wife was going to move, and Bob Thompson said, if the three of you move, we're down a significant percentage of people that can help out in the church. So he said, have you ever thought about funds development as a career? And I said, fun or funds? He said, well, they're sort of combined. So he talked me into interviewing at Ketchum, and that's how I got into the funds development, giving area. And I did work with all sorts of organizations, nonprofit organizations, but worked with the Southern Baptist Convention, and worked with some Presbyterian churches and some YMCAs, and that's how I got into doing that. And it's all about giving and telling your story about what you're doing, and how you're making a difference in the world. So that's that's how that all got started. And I'm not sure that was the question that you asked, Bob. There was a bit of rambling going on.
That's okay. However, we have to end our rambling around this point. So I am going to loop back to the message that you would like to leave with the audience. And you've already given part of that message, but maybe you can make it a little more coherent, I think is the word.
Okay, I guess my message would be that if you having faith and having hope and being generous makes for a loving, kind, abundant person. And that is, again, that's done very well for me. And I think it could do very well for a lot of people. And it doesn't mean you don't have goals or aims, but moving in those, realizing that there may be detours along the way, or side roads, or complete different highways that take you away from where you're really going. If you have faith and you have hope and you're generous with your time, with your talents, and with your resources, it's not a bad way to live. And you'll end up coming out the other end, I think, successful in the way that really counts, and that's being someone that's made a difference, that matters, that has brought something good to the world. Did that concisely?
That's very coherent,
Very
John.
coherent.
And thank you for those wise words.
It's been my pleasure.
Well, audience, as always, take what resonates with you, put the rest on the shelf to maybe pull down later when you're ready to hear it again. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.